My channel is sponsored by Factor, which means we'll have an ad from them somewhere in the middle of this video. In case you somehow missed this news, Microsoft/Xbox shut down 4 game studios this week, including Tango Gameworks, who most recently made Hi-Fi Rush, which in my opinion is the most underrated game of last year. That game is incredible. And Arcane Austin, who are known for making also a bunch of incredible games, obviously a blunder with Redfall, which was their most recent release, but they also made Prey. That game is so good, and have worked on Dishonored. Feels weird to say because it's only 2 games for whatever reason, but probably one of my favorite game franchises ever. They also shut down an extra 2 studios that I'm not as familiar with. One of them is AlphaDog Games, the maker of mobile game Mighty Doom, and Roundhouse Studios, which is being absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developers ZeniMax Online Studios. Bunch of extra context here that's important before I get into the things that I feel like I want to say today. Today I wanted to go out of my way to explain some things that I think that maybe gamers haven't realized yet, that the industry knows, but gamers haven't realized yet. But I'll give you more context first. So the article goes on to say Microsoft currently valued at over $3 trillion. I can't even fathom that amount of money. The way that I ever try to picture amounts of money that are unfathomable to me is if you pictured each of those dollars as people in a large room, how big is the room? 3 trillion? I have no concept of how big that is. That's too big. The number's too large. They did not say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contacted by IGN. But yeah, obviously everybody seemingly at Arcane Austin and Tango has lost their jobs. Some of those people, I believe, were folded into other developers, and some people in the actual corporate side at Bethesda were also laid off. Of course, goes without saying, this absolutely sucks. It sucks. This one is especially devastating to me because I kind of thought that we were through it. Felt like we hadn't had layoffs in a minute. If you haven't seen my GDC speech, I wrote this very spicy speech for this year's Game Developers Conference, basically just calling out the industry for doing this. And at GDC, I feel like things felt a little more positive. It really did feel to me like people thought we were through the worst of it. So I did not expect this, and it sucks. And it sounds like from some of the reports that have come out afterwards, this might not be it. There might be more layoffs coming in 2024, which is unfathomable because we've already had so many layoffs, one of the worst years in the history of the games industry. And before you tell me it's happening to other industries as well, I know that whenever I talk about this, people go, this is every industry. I get that, but I talk about video games here. I work in the games industry. I'm not saying other industries don't also have layoffs. What? Shut up. Yeah, Arcane Studios had to post it. It's super devastating for everybody. Obviously, the people affected the worst are the people who have lost their jobs. But what also gets me about this one is if you're going to shut down a studio like Tango, who just made Hi-Fi Rush, which, according to posts from leadership at Xbox, was a success that reviewed very well, that's now out on multiple platforms. If these two aren't safe with a $3 trillion company backing them, nobody is safe. Nobody in the games industry is safe. No studio you love is safe. Everyone is at risk of being shut down. And that should terrify you. It terrifies me, not just as somebody who works in the games industry, but as somebody who loves a lot of these game studios. This is just so fucking sad. But here's what I wanted to talk about. Why this is happening and why it's only going to get worse. And there's one real big point of this that I want to discuss. I guess 2. Hey, maybe even 3. Who knows? So many things to say. Mostly, wow, is this fucking depressing. So the first thing, you will occasionally see a response of, if they just make good games, this won't happen. Should have just made a good game then. That's what happens when you make Redfall. Should have just made a good fucking video game if you didn't want to get shut down. The quality of the video game is irrelevant. The quality of the video game is irrelevant. The quality of the game is not relevant. And that is a thing that I think gamers, people who enjoy video games, myself as a video game consumer, should be a lot more concerned about than they are. It is time to talk about Factor, which is a meal delivery service that I've been using for well over a year now. I started using it when I started boxing, and it made my life so much easier that now I use it every single week. So if you aren't familiar, Factor is a meal delivery service that provides delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. It makes it very easy for somebody like me who I feel like I always have so much to do. I'm always so busy. I don't have to think about what I'm gonna eat. I just heat it up, wait for it to cool down, and then eat it on the go. It saves me a ton of money because I know ordering takeout, and I know exactly what the nutritional content of the food that I'm actually eating is. I know how much protein I'm getting in a day, which is a thing that I try really hard to pay attention to. You can choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie, plus discover more than 60 add-ons every week like breakfast, on the go, lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day. I have the add-on for wellness shots every week. Just give me an extra few ingredients that I otherwise don't get in my diet. And I love them. So many of these meals taste so good. I recommend Factor super highly. So if you want to get started, get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders using my link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Huge thank you to Factor for sponsoring the video. Now back to the video. The quality of the games is irrelevant. Here's something that I think perfectly paints a picture of the landscape that we're in that I have had a lot of people ask me about. This is from March 5th. I'm sourcing Gamerant here, and it says Warner Bros. Want to focus on live service games instead of one and done titles like Hogwarts Legacy. This came right after the failure of Suicide Squad and the tremendous success of Hogwarts Legacy, and yet they are still choosing to go live service games instead of one and done titles that were very commercially successful. This is the reason quality doesn't matter, good doesn't matter. Why are they doing this? Why are they making live service games when they just had a huge flop, when Redfall just flopped? Why is there this focus on this thing that is clearly not working when you could instead make something like Hogwarts Legacy, which is a huge IP that a lot of fans enjoyed? The answer is the reality of the industry that we're in right now, and why I think things are going to get so much worse for gamers. Every single AAA game right now is a risk. Making any game that is that expensive to make is a risk. Making a Hogwarts Legacy, huge risk. The reality of going live service, which I'm sure we're going to see so much of, instead of going for more games like Hogwarts Legacy, which again, you would have considered a success, is that it is less risky for it to fail. Hey there, Game of Future Alanah here. I feel like I could have phrased this a little more succinctly. Both sides are risks. It's just that one risk has potentially like exponential gain. You know what I mean? It's risky to make a AAA game live service or single player. Both are hugely risky. It's just that the risk has more of a chance of paying off with like an infinite amount of money if you go live service. Does that make sense? Arcane could have made Dishonored 3 and it could have gotten 10 out of 10s and players could have loved it. But if it didn't make an unfathomable amount of money, and that's the reality that we're in, it's like just profit isn't enough. It has to be year-over-year profit. These companies have to make more money than they did last year because of capitalism. So just being successful is not enough. So any AAA game that you make that does not have a live service component, that doesn't have built-in battle passes, doesn't have built-in microtransactions, doesn't have an option for a bunch of players who act like whales to spend a whole lot of money and continually support that ecosystem, is a huge, huge risk. And it is a better financial bet from these companies that are businesses and see themselves as businesses at this point. They don't see themselves as creative outlets. They don't see themselves as art. The dev teams do. The publishers don't. You can have a studio make a really good game that is a one and done title like a Hogwarts Legacy that people really, really like, but it's still a random risk of if it will take off or if people will play it or if enough people will spend money on it. So it is a safer bet from a business standpoint to attempt a live service game, which may be cheaper in some ways, might not be in other ways, and to potentially have it blow up and get huge and make a bunch of money from a recurring and dedicated player base than it is to take the AAA single player risk. There's no amount of quality guarantees income to the level of income that they have come to expect. The live service game could fail, but it failing is still a better risk to take than making a AAA single player one and done experience at this point. The quality of the games doesn't matter. Anyone can get laid off and shut down, except for a studio that's making a live service game that is continuously getting profit. Now, we're also in a unique landscape right now that I think has just caught up to these executives. I touched on this on a stream the other night, but what you're currently in is a time war. This is a very new thing. I think COVID really kicked this into overdrive. This isn't a games industry thing anymore. This is a entertainment in general thing where they are all warring for your time. Your Xbox is also competing against your Netflix, is competing against your Twitter, is competing against your Instagram for the most amount of time they can get from you. And every single one of these entertainment services is designed to get as much time from you as possible, to prevent you from clicking away, to make sure that once you engage, you stay engaged. And that is very difficult for a game that ends in 20 hours. It is really hard for them to keep you coming back to that same service repeatedly, day after day, when you have spare time. They want you to be opening up your Xbox and looking at the Microsoft store, seeing things advertised to you, or potentially spending money on microtransactions instead of spending time on Instagram or TikTok. You are in an enormous time war where the most valuable currency that you as a consumer have is your time, and you are competing against multi-trillion-dollar corporations. What does it mean? For your time. They are doing everything they can, throwing every resource at you that they can to consume every second that you have. It sucks. Like, I don't think this is fixable. I think that this is and yeah, the appeal of live service spans a lot of facets of the games industry, but it's really that it can steal all of your time all the time. It can compete with a TikTok. They can do something to get you to spend all of your time on it and thus potentially increase the amount of times you will spend money on that thing. Making a good game is irrelevant. Making a great story that you can play for 15 hours is irrelevant. They want as much of your time as possible. Think about what you do with your time. So a couple of other facets of this that I want to touch on. This is a very doom and gloom video, I know it is. I'm just really sad. Like, I feel like I'm watching an industry that I love die. Single player games are not dying. Like, it's not happening 100% across the board. There's still a lot of value for certain companies. Like, not all of them are going to die, and that's a thing everyone's been saying for a long time. But obviously there is an overwhelming shift in that direction. Okay, so like, I'm not saying they're all gone. It's just a WB, a third-party publisher especially, you're probably going to see more of them make the changes that they've just said that they're going to make. That's it. Because it's less financially risky. So the second part, I see a lot of people say, time for indies to rise up. The indie space has got it. Indies are going to kill it. Let's keep playing indies. They're the creative ones anyway. I have terrible news for you, my friend. Things are just as bad in the indie space. Indie studios shut down all the time. You just don't hear about them because you haven't heard of them. It makes news headlines when Arcane shuts down. It doesn't make news headlines when the indie studio you haven't heard of shuts down. Facet of the industry is no less volatile than AAA is right now. They're in the same place. In fact, it's really hard for indies to get publishers right now. It's very difficult for indie games to get funded right now. The indie space being some haven where this is not happening and they can be creatively expressive. Not true, unfortunately. A lot of indies are falling right now as well and are going to continue to fall right now as well. There are some AAA game devs who've been talking about leaving AAA and going to indie to save this, and every time that I see that, I'm like, dude, please talk to people who actually work in the indie space before you jump ship and leave AAA to go straight to indie. Because while they will fight harder to keep everybody, indies have a lot less people, so the individual people are more valuable, paid less, but more valuable usually. They're less likely to lay people off because they're more likely to shutter the whole project. Indie is no more safe. Indie is absolutely no more safe right now. The third point is to the response of, what about Baldur's Gate 3? People will say, what about a Baldur's Gate 3? What about Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? These are certainly still games that are going to come out and will still exist, and studios that have huge legacies, a FromSoft can get away with this, a Larian can get away with this, a Nintendo can get away with this. They have huge legacies, big IP, and very focused leadership that is almost fighting against the climate. Those games are still going to exist, but they are exceptions. And so what I'm saying is the only way to get a Baldur's Gate 3 or an Elden Ring is to be a studio with a huge legacy, with a very experienced, knowledgeable team, and usually an IP, usually. Because for vast majority of studios who tried to do what Larian did with Baldur's Gate 3, it's going to shut at the studio. It's not going to work. That risk is too high. They are going to fail and they are going to shut down. And Sven, the head of Larian, has said so many wonderful things. His GDC acceptance speeches, his Game Awards acceptance speeches, where he's just calling out the industry for being greedy and for not having to do what they're doing. He's 100% right. The industry is choosing to shut these studios down. They're lying to you when they're saying it's a necessity. It's a choice. It's a choice because the profits are not high enough. The area where it is a necessity is that they just answer to the stock market. It's not like it's a group of people in a room sitting there and being individually evil and saying, let's fucking tank the whole games industry, live service, let's get as much money as possible. It'd be way easier if that was true. But really, it's just a bunch of people whose jobs it is to appeal to shareholders, to appeal to the stock market, just doing that because their whole job is to make sure arrow go up. And even if one of those executives were to look at a Baldur's Gate 3 and be like, huh, that did really well, let's try and do that. The next executive next to them would slap them because any live service game that is successful is infinitely more successful. It's so much more successful than a Baldur's Gate 3. It makes so much more money that why would you make even the single player experience that was expensive when you could make the live service game that's expensive that has more potential gain, right? I'm sorry about this video. So what do you do? What do you do? The only thing I think you can do is buy games you like. Think about what you put your time towards and buy games you like. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of positive shit to say for you. It's bad. Either they didn't start making enough money and the risks are too big. That's my nice uplifting video for today, you guys. Hope you all feel great. I'm just really sad. I'm just really sad. If you're gonna fucking shut down Tango, Hi-Fi Rush was so good, and it just, what's the point? What the fuck are we doing? By the way, I'm so sorry that I had to put an ad read in this video. I had to for time reasons, like it was required. That also